UX in crypto is so bad. It's just really hard to use. Like we did the thing. We proved that you could have money on the internet and like move it around and even ship that off to a bank and like convert it into fiat. But the process of doing that, like anyone who's had a MetaMask transaction fail for like a meaningful amount of money is like it's a bad experience. And like all the transactions and clicks you have to do to get it done. So the cross-chain interoperability potential is actually huge.
Chaos Labs, the leading on-chain risk management firm, recently launched its new flagship Oracle product, Edge. Edge delivers integrated, high-precision risk and price data for any application with a market. Follow and reach out to Chaos Labs on X to learn more.
What's up, guys? Just want to tell you a little bit more about Fuel Labs and their new Ethereum L2 Fuel Ignition. So Fuel Labs is launching Fuel Ignition, a high-performance ETH L2 powered by their Fuel VM. With the launch of Ignition, the team is also launching Phase 2 for their Fuel Points program to reward users and promote growth. Make sure to check out fuel.network to learn more. Nothing said on 0x Research is a recommendation to buy or sell securities or tokens. This podcast is for informational purposes only, and any views expressed by anyone on the show are solely our opinions, not financial advice. Boccaccio, Ryan, and our guests may hold positions in the companies, funds, or projects discussed. What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of 0x Research. Today I'm joined by Andrew and Burt, who are core contributors at Kwenta. Thanks for joining us, guys.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thanks.
Before we get started, do you guys want to run over what you guys are building over at Kwenta?
Sure. Ando, would you like to start?
Yeah, sure. I think I can kick us off. So Kwenta is a lightweight exchange that enables users to easily access on-chain perpetual futures. We started with synthetics and have seen most of our success and growth using the synthetics protocol as our liquidity source for our perps. And now we're starting to explore adding new liquidity sources, such as Perennial, which is about 2 to 3 months out. And we've just launched a case study about how that's been going if you want to check that out. But we've quadrupled their volume since integration and seen a lot of success. So now we're eyeing gains in GMX proposals, which have now passed, and we're continuing to grow across the on-chain ecosystem of perpetual futures and make on-chain trading as easy as possible.
That's perfect. And can you expand on what lightweight exchange means?
Sure. It just means that we don't have all the bulkiness of protocol for liquidity beneath us. We're basically just the UX layer on top of these liquidity protocols. So our job is just to specialize in making the best user experience for trading perps possible with on-chain tooling. And we get to skip all the process of trying to figure out the liquidity mechanics as we let the people that we're integrating with compete over offering the best solution.
Perfect. And I guess maybe for our listeners, do you want to run over how exactly that works? Like you're the UX, but how do you actually integrate synthetics and Perennial?
Sure. So what we do is basically use either direct contract integration or an SDK to populate our interface with their markets, data, etc., and make it as easy as possible just to plug into our exchange, connect your wallet, and start trading. And hopefully, eventually, just use your email or passkey to access these trading tools, deposit, and start trading perps.
Maybe I can jump in here too, and kind of give a different perspective on what the product really means, right? Because I'm really coming from a retail trading background. That's like what I do. I sit there and I lose all my money, right, on on these platforms like Quenta. So one of the problems that I took to the rest of the team, like Andrew over here, and really wanted solving was I'm using all these different perps exchanges. I'm using GMX. I'm using Gains. I'm using synthetics through Quenta. Um, how do I easily just go pop my money in one market, take it out, and pop it in another without having to have 16 tabs of different websites and go through this hassle of bridging. So what the guys did for me was really bring all of these tools kind of under one package. And this is right now we're working with the first iteration, and there are some really kind of cool plans in the future for how to make all of these things that if you were to go and trade, 5 different perps venues in order to access all these markets and all these liquidity, all these different things that you would need, we're just bringing them kind of all into one package and making it really easy for people to use.
That makes sense. How do you? So you have synthetics right now and Perennial, and you're thinking of GMX and Gains, how do you decide on which venues to integrate? What does the process of that look like?
Sure. So we're a decentralized protocol, meaning that we have a governance system. So any major changes, new integrations, anything that's not cosmetic, needs to go through our governance process. So you have to write a KIP, a Kwenta improvement proposal, and essentially have that presented to the community. And we have a council which is elected by our stakers or our token holders to make these decisions. So they'll vote on the proposal once it's been presented, and then that change is officially passed on to the core contributors to execute on. So in the case of Gains and GMX, both of them wrote up proposals. They went through the council, they were voted and accepted and passed. And now the core contributors are working through the integration process. So yeah, a bit of bureaucracy, but pays off. So
Bureaucracy is a feature, not a bug.
I want to ask a bit about that bureaucracy because I feel like I get to talk to a lot of people, and you either hate governance processes or you're like really into governance, like futarchy, everything. How has taking off your Quenta hat, just like as a developer, what has that experience been like for you, like dealing with governance? I'm sure it has its ups and its downs, but any.
yeah, so I designed a lot of these governance mechanics. So it's definitely something that I felt was like a good decision. And I think a lot of the small tweaks you've made have been positive, but it's mostly come to fruition as I sort of hoped it would be, which is, after kind of studying the ecosystem and seeing what has been working. And I originally was a core contributor at Synthetics where they had their own council and they had multiple different councils. So they had like four different groups voting for different things. We just have one single council, and those KIPs go through that one council. It's kind of as lightweight of a governance process as you can get before just straight up being, like a top-down organization. So it's I would say as close to a hybrid model of being decentralized as possible. So I would say that the uh, speed or friction has minimal impact aside from needing to go through the formalities. So as painful as it is, it's not that painful. It's I think something that works hard for the community. Everyone feels across what's going on, and it's just good for engagement and communication. Like a lot of the proposals, I think sure they could be, kind of just run through the core contributors. We trust that they're making good decisions, and if we have to, we can shut them down, kind of thing. But I think it's good to just engage with the community, have those discussions, and it sort of just keeps everyone updated on what's happening. So curious what Bert's take is because he's less, yeah, part of the original design. So
I'm pretty opinionated on governance, and I've to give a little context, I participated pretty hard in synthetics governance as well, since they're our main partner, and I've just kind of been a fan of the project for a really long time. I wanted to get involved, and I think Andrew's view of the differences between our process and their process is pretty good. Ours is a little more lightweight. Um, I think a lot of times to kind of take it back and explain a little bit of what it means to have this kind of council model and this hybrid model rather than a direct token holder vote. Um, the council doesn't really have, let's say, positive power over the core contributors, right? You can tell the core contributors what to do, but it's still up to the core contributors whether or not to take that action. And so you still have this fundamental control that the people who are building the protocol have because they can choose whether to build it or not, right? But for the purpose of finding direction, the big question I think everybody has in their head is, what do users really want? So, in my opinion, the best way to find out what users really want is to bring them into the process and actually have them engage in building. And we've kind of pushed this further, I think, than anybody else in the space. At one point, we had a lot of really active developers developing through our core contributor Ralph's project, the DevDAO. So there were people actually putting lines of code in Kwenta that were then reviewed by core contributors, and so it was really this whole decentralized building process. And I think like that combined with the idea that every core contributor feels like they have kind of an equal say in governance, they can stand up there and talk about strategy as well. It makes it feel like everybody in the community, everybody working on this has ownership over the project, and I think that actually brings quite a positive element. Like, why am I going to stay up until 3 in the morning just working my ass off on something. If it was just a top-down hierarchy and I'd have a job, I'm not going to do that. Okay, I'm going to do the minimum. But if I feel like I have ownership over this thing, then I'm going to go out of my way to make sure that it's a success.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, and it's probably the best defense of on-chain. I find like a lot of people, as they are in protocols and they work with governance, sometimes they can become a bit pessimistic about it. But I agree with you. I think like just giving people the chance to collaborate is pretty special. Special is not a
Yeah, I
great
mean,
word,
has
but
anybody done a project for years and not become pessimistic about it? I can tell you everything I've ever done in my history. I can tell you why it sucked. You know what I mean? It's uh, it's just something that happens naturally.
that makes sense. Is there anything that you guys would have done differently? You mentioned that it's gone for a few iterations. What's something that you definitely would have done at the very beginning that was like a life changer afterwards, but you guys kind of realized it a bit late? It's okay if there's nothing.
I would never do governance. I wouldn't recommend it to anyone. If you're trying to be a fast, competitive product, like I wouldn't do governance at all. I'd find some way around it. It's not like super good for just like raw competition and just like having ownership and accountability. So I think what we're seeing now with a lot of protocols is trading off elements of decentralization for just really good UX, really good product. And I think that our governance has been in a bit of a bubble in terms of like how it's been impacted by our decisions at like a product level. But I don't think that's something that's going to happen forever. I'm curious to see like how the next like year impacts the governance process, because surely there's going to be elements of competition coming out in the next 6 months that we're going to need to stay on top of, or not be able to keep up. And I think that I hope that governance is set up so that it can act quickly enough as it is right now to compete. Because I think that someone coming out with a heavily capitalized project that adds a UX layer with zero governance and just makes an exceptional product is something that very well could compete head to head with us and do a great job. So what we're doing very hard, I think, at this point is making sure that we're ahead of that as much as possible and trying to ensure that we have a good competitive moat for speed. I would just say that the things that I've learned here are that we're vulnerable to a centralized competitor just running us over with raw cash, speed, decision making, etc. And all we can do right now is basically build up that moat and buffer so that it's really, really hard to actually attack us. So I don't know if that's a governance problem or not, but there's something there that's definitely at the back of my mind while we're like making competitive decisions, etc. So yeah.
Yeah, I think Andrew's right here. There are some downsides to this decentralized governance process. It is a little bit slower and it's a little bit more difficult to find a single vision, which a lot of really successful projects, whether you go to TradFi, DeFi, anything, have like a founder with a very strong vision who's very present, right? So trying to take the decentralized process and recreate that sense of purpose is very, very difficult. So I think even though I'm kind of a decentralized governance maxi, uh, I'm going to have to come in and try to support that from the other side and figure out how do I justify having the community so involved in the process. And really, like, I think where we've struggled is making sure that every community member who gets in and participates in governance really has that incentive to carry it through and really keep representing Kwenta and like keep that as part of their core mission, right? So I think that's going to be a challenge, is making sure that, and it has been a challenge, right? Making sure that when people get in governance and they're participating, that they really follow through. I think that's been a challenge for everybody. So that's probably where I'm going to have to justify it moving forward.
That's fair. That centralized versus decentralized trade-off, I feel like has been very, very apparent this cycle. Like L2s, I think is like Mega ETH one sequencer versus, well, I guess all L2s have it, but I mean, not even doing like the facade that we usually do is has been the case. But
Yeah, I think Andrew, your points as well about the kind of streamlining the console system. I mean, you mentioned synthetics, and I think even recently they are looking to kind of streamline down to a single console. So I find, you deciding to go with that design prior to that decision, I mean, it's very prescient, trying to attack that. speed and make, getting things done. Just interesting to see that play out like that and see, others in the market kind of go that way. But to shift maybe the conversation a little bit, let's talk about maybe in terms of even from the lens of competition, what are your guys like forward-looking cross-chain plans? I know we just talked about some of the venues that you're looking to add, and a lot of that liquidity is like Arbitrum, for example. But are you guys looking forward to integrating, venues across other L2s or other chains going forward? And what does that look like for you?
So we already are cross chain, right? So we have Optimism right now was kind of where we started. We've launched on base with Synthetics. We have Synthetics V3 on base. You can go use it right now. We have Arbitrum with Perennial, which you mentioned earlier, and we have Arbitrum with Synthetics coming up very, very soon. So we have all of those on our plate. Plus, I believe there are plans for an L1 perp, which is some pretty exciting stuff. It'll be expensive to use, but a lot of people maybe playing with big capital only want to have it on L1, so that could be an interesting product. So all of these things are happening, and I think at this point, moving forward to other chains might not be the priority as much as just figuring out how the UX works on the chains that we are on right now. And so that's one of the things that the contributors have been working on very hard, is trying to figure out, okay, from a user perspective, what kind of tools do you need to come in and seamlessly use Synthetics on base, GMX on Arbitrum, Perennial on Arbitrum, and have this be something practical. So I know one of the big things that we've been doing kind of internally is trying to figure out what a markets page that's totally unified looks like. And I think these simple things, being able to compare markets across chains, being able to compare funding across chains, like those types of things are the tools that you need to interact with something like this. And that's really where the focus is right now.
Great answer. I want to, Andrew, I'm curious your thoughts there as well, but I originally asked around cross chain and I wanted to tee up the concept of like, what are you guys looking at from like a chain abstraction sort of point? Obviously, you're handling these venues across different chains. You mentioned a few things. Is there anything like super critical right now that maybe you don't have that you're working towards, that you think is like the next big unlock here as you are offering, liquidity across multiple chains and trying to make that easier for users to interact?
Yeah. So I would just say that we are actively assessing tooling to abstract as much of this away as possible in terms of like using different chains. UX in crypto is so bad. It's just really hard to use. Like we did the thing. We proved that you could have money on the internet and like move it around and even ship that off to a bank and like convert it into fiat. But the process of doing that, like anyone who's had a MetaMask transaction fail for like a meaningful amount of money is like it's a bad experience. And like all the transactions and clicks you have to do to get it done. So the cross-chain interoperability potential is actually huge because I think we're abstracting a ton of those little clicks and potential fail points away, and just moving all of the like nonsense of how we did this thing and how we made it happen like away from the user. Like they don't really need to know what optimism is, or they don't need to know what like I don't know some of the components of even like bridging, etc. So if we can just come up with a solution for them where it's all just magically happening, like that's the dream solution. So I would say it's arguably our highest priority is figuring out how we can like hide the little intricacies of crypto because it's fucking terrible. Like, so hopefully this gets a lot better, and I think it's going to be an improvement with so many projects like actively coming up with solutions right now. And I'm watching all of them, like mostly a lot of the bridging solutions right now are coming up with like I think very interesting things, and we actively have conversations with them, but still to be determined who's going to win this out. But constantly trying and testing these new solutions as they come up. So yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. I think maybe one more on the same topic is, there's a continuously debate around designs for, and particularly in PerpDEX designs, we see this where there's this conversation around whether it makes sense to launch on an existing L1 or L2 or, have your own app chain. Do you see like, we see, venues exploring multiple models here. There has been a little bit of a trend in some of these exchanges going to their own chains. Do you see that like adding a little bit of a roadblock for you guys in terms of just making this, cross-chain interactivity a little bit more complex if more and more of these venues kind of just go to their own chains, maybe with their own unique infrastructure setups.
Yeah, I think I think there are a couple different perspectives there. Number one, like you said, there are some advantages for these projects going to their own L1s. I think I'm going to throw a little bit of shade here, just a little bit of shade. If you're going to your own L1 and you're not using like an L2 that inherits the security of Ethereum, what are you even doing? Because you can, if you wanted to launch a centralized exchange, you can actually do that without launching a whole chain and larping like you're decentralized. You can just launch a centralized exchange and it's going to work great. A lot of people have done this, and if you have a market maker, great, you're in good shape. If you want to actually launch a decentralized protocol, which is kind of robust and inherits the security of Ethereum, it's going to be a little bit different. But luckily, both Optimism and Arbitrum are working on, like with the Optimism Superchain or Arbitrum Orbit, you can actually launch your own purpose-built chain that inherits the security of Ethereum, and this is now possible. So I know there Synthetics is not using their chain yet for perps trading. They've launched a governance chain already, and this is kind of like an interesting concept. If Synthetics has their own chain, what are they planning over there with this? Right now, it's just governance. In the future, it could be trading or anything. But I think from our perspective, it does make it a little more complicated because let's say Arbitrum, we have GMX, Gains, Synthetics, Perennial. If you wanted to move margin between these different protocols, and it's all on Arbitrum, it's just a single block, right? Once your trade is settled, you can just use a multi-call and move your margin out of one and into the other, and it's like there's no difference between them. Once people start isolating on other chains, even though there might be some UX advantages for them, it does make it a little more complicated for us. But I think there are some really interesting solutions coming up. Like Socket is actually one of the projects that's already integrated into Kwenta. And I know Socket and a lot of these other bridging protocols and cross-chain interoperability protocols are trying to figure out how you reduce the time or completely eliminate the time it takes to bridge across chains. And of course, it's become very, very cheap. Like if you're moving USDC already, it's what, $2 to move. You can move $1 million and only pay $2. So that is already almost where we need it in order for this to essentially not be an issue, right? It's very, very close, and there's some great people working on this stuff.
Yeah, I imagine with intents becoming more and more popular, and I assume their like costs will go down as there's more intent networks. You'll just like it'll become dirt cheap to go from chain X to chain Y or even within. I know. Is your intents integration live yet, or is this something that you guys are working on, or is this something that is coming up?
It is not live yet. I think I'm assuming what you might be referring to is the perennial intent system. This is something that they recently announced, and I don't have too many details for you. We'll have to kind of wait for Perennial to release details about this. But essentially, the way they're going to be using intents, right, is to create an extremely fast hybrid system where, as far as I understand it, their AMM is going to be able to work seamlessly with an order book, and I think that's really we've seen a couple of teams kind of take this approach to solve a lot of the issues with both order books and AMMs, to try to combine the two and have an order book that provides very dynamic liquidity. If you're a market maker, you can provide a lot of liquidity at mark, or in an instant, if market conditions change, take it away, and then have all that liquidity backstopped by an AMM. So that's kind of what Perennial is using intents for, and I'm sure there's going to be more information pretty soon on that.
That makes sense. I One thing you brought up was that if you are going to be not decentralized, you might as well just launch a sex. And this has been not that, but the idea that like the sex dex competition has been very, very favored by sexes still. What do you think is like the main struggle that perps have on chain compared to sexes, and how close do you think we are to taking more and more volume off centralized venues?
Yeah, It's maybe worth prefacing this with the fact that there is still an advantage to being on chain. Like it's not like centralized exchange is just outright better. The whole scenario with FTX collapsing and losing users' funds is impossible on chain. We can't meddle with the rules of how those like trading dynamics happen. And that's why like it's still worth figuring out how to, execute the financial ecosystem on chain. So it's still worth doing, even if it's faster with centralized exchange. The risk and security of doing it on chain is definitely worth it. I think the struggles are very much that the latency and just general like efficiency of being on chain is just not as strong as what centralized exchanges have done. However, I think that the innovation is happening on chain. AMMs are a model that didn't exist until on chain finance happened. So now we have the efficiency of an order book being married with the innovation happening with an AMM. And I think now we might actually be able to eat at the volume being produced off chain because we're doing something that's new. It's taking something that I think is like going to be the new meta for perps, which is this hybrid order book and pool system, and do something completely competitive with it that I think can eat at the centralized exchange like order book model. Order books are tried and true; they work well, but there's no like weird magic of DeFi happening in order books. So it's good that we still have the MMs, and it's I'm interested to see how the hybrid order book model really like offers new efficiencies in the system. So yeah, that'll be interesting.
Yeah, and to build a little bit on what Ando said over here, he brought up FTX, which of course is kind of the classic example, especially in recent memory, of a time where when centralized exchanges go wrong. And the thing I kind of want to point out is that this A isn't the first time this has happened with centralized exchanges, and B isn't the first time that us as kind of the pioneers of crypto have had to explain to people why you want to go on chain. I mean, this goes all the way back to when I first heard about Bitcoin, trying to explain to people who didn't really get it, like, why don't we just use dollars still? And trying to figure out how to tell people why you would actually hold this in your own wallet and what the advantages are. I think what we're learning is that this is not something where you explain it to the public and then it clicks and then you're done. Like this is something we're going to have to keep explaining for probably the rest of the industry, and there might be times when people decide that actually non-custodial isn't a big deal. Maybe you want a custodian in some cases, but I think fundamentally what we're doing is creating a non-custodial system here. So that is the whole point of crypto. That is what we do here. And we're going to have to keep explaining to market participants why that's valuable. And if you don't believe it's valuable, then I don't know why you're here, because that's like the whole point. That's what it is.
Yeah, I, that's I think a great breakdown and kind of like separation there. Diving into the kind of the value statements. I guess when we think about the perp space in general, um, how like if we look across the board and we view it as a category, how does Kwenta fit in your guys' opinions, and what are some like key factors like in terms of differentiating Kwenta from the rest of the field in the competition today?
Yeah, so Kwenta is a layer on top of all of the perps. So eventually, our idea here is that if you're trading on-chain perps, you're going to be doing it through Kwenta, and we're going to be guiding you to access the best of what's available. Maybe not by automatically routing, but presenting you with all the information you need to make sure that for the trade you're making, it's going to be the best place to go execute that trade and have like multiple positions open across different exchanges and places. We want to be the UX layer on top of perps on chain. Like that's the whole Kwenta vision. Um, I think in terms of like what makes us different is that we're not trying to add our own liquidity in. We're really just trying to make it so that accessing this is as easy as possible. And when users are trying to access anything on chain perps, it's through Quanta. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think too, we're in this place with on-chain perps where people forget how recently it actually became possible. I mean, I remember Synthetics V1 trying to use this. It was, I think, 15 seconds for an order to settle, which doesn't sound too long. 15 seconds is the time you can wait. But if you're talking about price movements in 15 seconds during volatility, it's absolutely possible. Like this isn't a product you can use. And you go back further, and trying to build something like this on L1 would have sounded absolutely ridiculous when we first started using these DeFi tools. So right now is kind of the first time this is even possible. And I think Kwenta's model of kind of being a front end, a pure front end, is something you're going to start seeing a lot more. A lot of these different projects, like GMX and Gains, of course, came to us and gave us a proposal. And I think that's like the start down this road that a lot of these backend builders are going down, where these projects want to be kind of a liquidity layer. That's what Synthetics has started calling themselves. That's what Perennial has started calling themselves. And so if you're a liquidity layer and that's where you're focusing, you're going to need people to build applications on top. And actually, even going back to like um, Lyra, which I'm a big fan of Lyra. We actually had an integration with them at one point, and then they went off and built their own L2. Um, they're called Deriv now, but Lyra at one point had a proposal from Coinstore, which was a centralized exchange, and Coinstore wanted to access on-chain liquidity and essentially build their own white label front end. So you would have logged on to the centralized exchange Coinstore, and if you wanted to trade options, it would have used the on-chain liquidity. So I think that that didn't really pan out at the time. Maybe it was a little early, a little before its time. But I think these are hints as to where the industry is going, where you're going to have these super specialized teams building application front ends. You see this a little bit with wallet providers, and we're really just kind of at the forefront of that.
Chaos Labs, the leading on-chain risk management firm, recently launched its new flagship Oracle product, Edge. Edge delivers integrated, high-precision risk and price data for any application with a market. After 2 months of securing Jupiter, Edge has already secured $30 billion in volume and more than 60% of all Solana perps volume. Edge is comprised of 3 components: high-precision price data with an integrated risk engine, automated delivery of real-time parameter adjustments on-chain, and secure delivery of custom data points via zero-knowledge proofs. Follow and reach out to Chaos Labs on X to learn more. Thanks again to Chaos Labs for sponsoring today's episode.
What's up, guys? Fuel Ignition is finally here. Fuel Ignition is a high-performance L2 solution that aims to solve both state sustainability and performant execution as an ETH rollup. Ignition is built upon the Fuel VM and a UTXO-based asset-centric architecture with ETH-grade security. Make sure to check out the growing Fuel ecosystem by participating in Phase 2 of the Fuel Points program today. Visit fuel.network to learn more.
Historically, perps have been very competitive as a space. We haven't really seen like a single dominant winner kind of take over the landscape as we've seen maybe in other categories, although most thought it would. So I think one of the big things that we've seen is, as incentive programs and new exchange venues have popped up, people have kind of, traders and users like looking to chase airdrops and new tokens, they've kind of jumped around. And that liquidity has kind of shifted across the space over time. Do you see this like continuing to play out, or will, at some point that sort of dies off, the existing winners kind of continue to grow from there? Does it matter for you as trying to be that front end layer anyway? What are your thoughts?
Definitely, it's going to continue to grow and change, and I think, as I kind of pointed out before, this perp space is all very, very new, and a lot of the stuff we're talking about, we mentioned earlier the hybrid model, where you would have an AMM backstopping an order book. This kind of stuff is still being built out, and I think that's what's exciting about the perp space, is that so much of it is still just hypothetical at this point. We haven't really seen it in action, so I think that is what's leading to a lot of these shifts in popularity. Incentives, of course, have something to do with it. You can get people over to try your exchange using incentives. You can't get them to stay with incentives because eventually these things run out. You have to build a good product. And so we've seen, at one point it was DYDX really at the forefront. And DYDX had great UX at the time. GMX had the deepest liquidity. You could trade more ETH than ever before. And so that's why you saw guys like Sifu taking these massive positions on chain. He did the same thing with Synthetics and was actually splitting orders. So you could see even the liquidity there wasn't really sufficient for what a lot of these big players needed. And then, you have now Hyperliquid kind of coming in and using a more kind of a centralized approach with their own L1, but really delivering liquidity. They have great market maker backing and speed and performance and a lot of different assets that you can trade. So I think that's why you've seen this back and forth, is because as the perp space is being built, we're just reaching new heights, and really that next rung is there for anybody to take. Whoever can come in and take the advantages of the GMX and synthetics model and the hyperliquid model and kind of combine them, you're going to be able to be king for a while, because that just hasn't really been reached yet.
Can I add I think the money games probably won't go away, like some sort of incentive farming. Like I think in general, that's just a component of crypto that's going to stay permanently. I think that's how we're going to get like the masses in here, is just there's going to be so much value add from like weird incentive schemes that you probably won't make sense to just be in a bank because it's like opportunity cost at that point. But I do think that there's going to be an element of like the it's harder and harder to just like come out and start with like a perps exchange now. Like it's a red sea at this point. Like even pitching investors and saying, "Hey, I have this new idea for a perps exchange," like they're gonna groan. You know what I mean? So you better have something pretty special to tell them. So it needs to be something that's like completely innovative. You have to have some kind of advantage. You have to probably be pretty big and well funded to like come in and be the next. I think DYDX has kind of been usurped a little bit right now by Hyperliquid. Like to be the next Hyperliquid now, like I mean, it's going to take some magic. So it definitely is becoming a harder game to play. So yeah, I think there is a bit of maybe a curve happening where it's not like a trillion projects are going to be launching. You might just see like a couple of cherry picking here and there. Um, I like the idea of how Kwenta can like capture that and like help people access that easily, but I also feel that we can only like take on so much addressable market. So I hope that it does kind of consolidate, but I think it's not going to stop for sure.
Yeah, and we have to really see all these trends coming, because even though we're not providing the liquidity, and any of our partners can be the most successful, we have to be able to identify the trends in the space, because we can't go putting a bunch of work into something that's kind of already a failed project, right? Like we can't go working with a partner that can't deliver kind of the precipice of the space. So that's kind of where our bread is buttered, so to speak.
This is going to be a slight tangent, but I want to ask about it because Bert, you mentioned trends, and you mentioned that you guys integrated Lyra at some point. Do you have any plans to integrate options again? Um, if not, is it because we've just failed to find PMF? Um, and if that's the case, why do you think that is? It's like 3 questions back to back, but curious for your thoughts.
All right. I'm gonna say yes. We're gonna integrate options again, not because it's really on the table, but because I just really want to trade options. I think the one thing to put in perspective here is that options in TradFi for crypto, that's probably where the deepest liquidity is going to pop up, and it's very difficult to hedge these things without like a lot of different very liquid markets. So I think ETH options in crypto are going to eventually unlock uh, more liquidity for ETH options in DeFi, as it becomes much easier to hedge. So I don't think it's necessarily that like product market fit has failed. I think it's just very difficult to attract a lot of liquidity. And when I go and trade options, if I see liquidity is really low, it's just not a useful product, right? Even if the product should be useful, it's not going to be, and I can't really trade it. So that's kind of my perspective on the matter. But I think derivatives are going to continue to be interesting. I think if you think it's going to stop here, you might be mistaken.
I'm just interested in perps. I don't have any plans to introduce options, and I don't want to break Bert's heart, but there's already a lot going on just in perps. Like as you said, perps is new. There's a lot of innovation just there. I think options are something that North Americans have used to get leverage, and that's why it's so popular. And we haven't really had something like perps that's just like clean way to like get leverage. So I'm curious to see if people care that much about like risk management or if they just want like super easy leverage, which is my hunch. So we'll see, but it's definitely not at the top of the docket. Like it's something I think we're going to be monitoring closely for fit, etc. But I think Perps has a lot to give us still.
Yeah, fair points from both of you guys, I think. To shift back from the tangent, we were talking incentive programs for perps protocols. Not that it's necessarily directly an incentive program, but I do have, maybe to preface this question, I do have a little bit of a thesis that I think we'll continue to see, strong, resilient kind of apps and protocols within this space transition into using points programs that mirror what we see in traditional businesses, airlines points programs, credit card, cashback, things like that. So to kind of line that up for you guys, Kwenta does have a new points system. It seems, just from my read, it seems like it's a little bit of like battle pass, season pass kind of design, similar to maybe like a gamified sort of design where, you compete on like a season basis to earn points and then get some rewards for it. Was there any like clear like inspiration for it? And I guess so. I don't think it's been very long, maybe a month or so. Have we seen positive results so far just from the implementation there?
Yeah, I think so. The inspiration here was honestly our original incentive program. We had a Quenta incentive program, and this serves a couple of purposes. Not only is it a great incentive, but if you're a decentralized protocol and you need decentralized governance, you have to distribute that token somehow. Like we have to figure out who has skin in the game, how to measure that, and then how to provide them with the ability to govern. So it's not just about like free tokens, right? It's actually solving a fundamental problem for the organization. But what we were doing is doing this kind of calculated or this complicated calculation on the back end. This is similar to what DYDX was doing for their token distribution program. Um, and it was a little bit unclear to users exactly how this calculation was happening, exactly how much rewards power they had. So I said, you know what, let's just take this whole thing and actually display it to the user. We were using something called reward score on the back end. And now essentially points are there's your reward score on a separate page where you can view it and with a couple gamified aspects, like you can actually rise the ranks and increase your reward score relative to other users. So a lot of people have told me like, why are you guys doing points? The meta's dead. Which, let me tell you, it's not dead. Points meta in games is never over. It's like timeless, right? So I think people just need to get used to the idea that having a measurement of your participation in the application or the DAO isn't going to go away. So exactly what benefits this confers to users is something we're keeping a little bit close to our chest at this point. And I think that's one of the features is to see who's motivated by it. We've definitely seen a few people very excited about this. I think a lot of people are really waiting to find out what the benefits are. And I have some pretty interesting ideas there. So I'm kind of excited to show this to everybody. We have like in our perennial proposal that we made to the Arbitrum DAO, the proposal along with perennial that we made for these Arbitrum tokens, we actually did already commit some Quenta tokens to this program through that proposal. So whether or not this is going to be more expansive, I don't really want to let on, but it's kind of obvious what's happening here, right? Is that like what we're trying to do is measure participation, and then there will be a few more fun ways, like gamified ways that you can participate or spend your points or kind of uh, use them for some kind of game within the game, right? And the end result is your participation in the protocol is going to be rewarded.
Yeah, I think that's great. We've seen, not to name any names, but we've seen, some protocols start to kind of experiment with this type of design. So I think it's interesting to see you guys take this same path. And like I said, traditional, game companies doing battle passes, season passes, things like that. It's a way for players to come back and kind of keep contributing and get some benefit out of it. So ultimately, I mean, I'm personally a fan of kind of this approach and point systems, the direction that they're headed. So it's good to see that.
Yeah, if I had my way, there would be a whole game around it already. I have to kind of compete for dev resources here. I have to claw my my devs in my direction to help this out. But yeah, I have some ideas coming up. I've taken a lot of inspiration from like trading card games and these more just things you play for fun, right? That have absolutely nothing to do with DeFi. And so I really want to bring this into the points program and just make it something that is ongoing, keeps running, and is just something to keep people engaged and measure your participation. So we'll find more ways to do that soon, and as well as like we have actually a bonus points mission right now. So essentially, if you've traded 1 million or more in volume on GMX, Gains, Hyperliquid, or a previous Kwenta deploy, you can come in and you actually get double points for your first, I believe it's about 10,000 in volume. And this is just something to reward people who are already active. Make sure it's not Sybilable, right? You have to have some kind of on-chain history for coming in and trying the new version of Kwenta. Maybe you've never been there. Maybe you haven't been there in a little while. You can come in and try the new version of Kwenta, and you're going to get extra rewarded for it. So that's a little hint as to like how we might use this in the future to really target specific users with this positive history on chain.
Perfect. I maybe to take it, I guess, more of an overview. What are on the strategy side? What are some things that you guys did that you thought was very very good for like go to market to get liquidity and volume on Kwenta? And what are some things that you definitely would have done differently that you did kind of in not the most efficient way? It's okay if there's nothing bad.
I'll start with I think adding perennial recently was a really tough decision because we've been with synthetics for so long. We've had tremendous success with synthetics. Like we've done 60 billion in volume just with synthetics. So I think it was a sort of strange decision at the time to decide to like expand beyond that. But what we're seeing now is it opened doors to new communities, new traders, new liquidity sources. And it's really just like expanded the horizons of what Quanta can achieve. So it was at the time a tough decision, and it felt to me as someone who was originally coming from synthetics, very much an OG, like a counterintuitive decision. I felt that there was a level of commitment needed, but now I think what we've done is actually we've really bought our independence at this point and have a lot of pathways that we can go down, new possibilities for us. So I think that's probably one of the most positive things that we've done. Um, and one of the most negative things, or something that we could have done better, probably that I think I just would have done it sooner. Like I think just expanding and being more committed to just being a UX layer. I think we weren't sure if we wanted to like add our own liquidity system, do our own unique derivatives to like complement synthetics for a long time. I think we've always just been good at executing on UX, like just like coming up with features, doing what traders want. I really do think we have one of the most competitive UXs in just all of DeFi. We probably should have just tripled down on that, like, and just done that from the get-go. Once we saw that we were getting traction, able to like provide to perps traders, like we should have just been making sure that we always had the best offering, no matter who it was with, and continued to find incentives programs, things that were interesting for people, and experiment with that because that's really our bread and butter. That's what we're like really good at doing, I think. So yeah, I would have just probably had conviction quicker that we would have been a UX layer and just, instead of trying to find ways to provide value, et cetera, for our existing partnerships, just experiment early and quick. So yeah.
Yeah, and bringing this back to our original discussion about decentralized governance too. I think we have this kind of push and pull, right? Where we've certainly seen success from experimenting with perennial. That's also probably one of our biggest drawbacks is that we are so willing to experiment. So it's led to a lot of direction changes, and it can be kind of hard to see exactly where the path leads. So I think our it's been kind of the same answer here, right? Our biggest success and our biggest failures have both been just being so willing to try something new and kind of find that product market fit. And I think moving forward, the challenge is going to be like, okay, taking those learnings, figuring out that yeah, we can go and build this kind of new product and really have this focus of being a perps marketplace. And how do we take this kind of wide focus and then narrow it down and figure out how we can really make the most impact with what we're doing day one, day two, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. I To wrap it up, what is I usually struggle asking this, but I want to be very clear. What are you guys specifically excited about? Not like what's coming up with Kwenta, but what are you guys specifically excited about that is coming up with Kwenta? And um, no, that's really it. What is like your dream and ambition for the next 6 to 12 months is the time period.
So what I'm excited about, I mentioned a little bit earlier, uh, perennials in 10th system and kind of moving toward a hybrid order book AMM system. Synthetics also has already a proposal live for an order book, and so they're doing something very similar. I know a lot more about how the synthetic system works, where actually what we'll be able to do is kind of hot swap in this order book to the existing AMM system that's already running. We won't have to deprecate V3 or anything like this. It's actually just adding the order book as another a settlement strategy. So you could even enter through the order book and exit through the AMM. Um, and and this type of innovation is something that's going to be brought to Kwenta first. So working with these partners and really trying to figure out how you take this really interesting backend design that's unlocking new, more dynamic liquidity, and figuring out how to give users the best experience and make this kind of intuitive for users. That's really what I'm most excited about, because I really want to use these products. And where am I going to do that? I'm going to have to do that on Kwenta. Like, we're going to be the first to have this with Perennial and Synthetics. So pretty excited to see those things come to fruition.
Um, there is a referendum going on right now with synthetics. It just passed. It was successful. And what that's going to do is basically create a whole new unified system where it's just one council, bringing back some of the core OG people that really made synthetic special, like Kane. He'll be an advisor to it, and some of the earliest investors. I think I'm really excited to see the potential of what that can do for the synthetics and overall perps ecosystem, as they have been historically exceptional at innovating and doing things that no one's done before. They're good at pioneering. So I think that as excited as I am about bringing in new integrations and doing what we can to maximize the experience for our users, I also feel excited about that DeFi OG like renaissance happening right now, and I think I'm here for it. I think I want to be able to support that and however that happens. And I think that we already have a lot of smart people. We don't really need more people to come in and launch shitcoins and have low liquidity and for people to struggle. Like, Synthetics has the liquidity, it has the innovation, it has the team and the momentum. I think I'm mostly excited about taking what's already working and bringing it back up to the top. So yeah, probably bullish synthetics take, but definitely something I want to see come to fruition and really like do it justice, because yeah, it could go anyway, but yeah, I'm optimistic.
Perfect. Both very, very good answers. And that I appreciate that you guys are actually giving me what you guys are excited about and not something like, oh. Um, where can our listeners find out more about Kwenta? Where do you want them to go first to engage with Kwenta, apart from the front end?
Yeah, apart from Quenta itself, we're on. I mean, our Discord is where we're most active, so you can find me in there probably 29 hours a day. If you use Discord, please come in, come say hi. We'll answer all your questions. We'll listen to your trading ideas, whatever you want. If you want to just keep up with news, we have, of course, our Twitter, where we post anything important and just occasional shit posting. We have our blog, which you can find from the Kwenta front end, but you can also get there from blog.kwenta.io right now. And and yeah, we're also, we're on DBank, we're on Warpcast, we're on pretty much any social media platform you can think of. Maybe not quite as active there as our Discord. We have a Telegram, but whatever you prefer, we'll try to post everything that's very, very important there. And if you want to talk to me, just slide into my DMs.
Fantastic. Danny, do you have anything you want to say, or shall I wrap it up?
Burt is in the trenches in Discord, and the listeners should be too. So yeah, go check them out.
Fantastic. Guys, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. It was a great time.